The sun rises over the peaceful streets of a small town in northern Xia. The sounds of daily life fill the air. Farmers plowing the fields, children playing in the streets, merchants calling out their wares. The calm of the morning is shattered by the distant sound of hoofs, gradually growing louder, until the ground shakes beneath the arrival of a Mongol garrison. The soldiers move to the town, unaware of the danger. A man looks angry as the Mongol garrison passes. Suddenly, civilians rise from the shadows, ambushing the Mongol patrol with stones and weapons. The town, once full of life, erupts in violence. In the chaos, a Mongol soldier is captured and thrown to his knees. His heart racing, he looks up. His vision blurs as the shadow of a civilian falls over him. And then, darkness. This was more than a revolt. This was a declaration of defiance, one that would ignite the wrath of a conqueror. This time, it is the Mongols who face the fury of those they once conquered. But what drove the Xia people to rise up against them? How did Genghis Khan's relentless ambition, his drive for vengeance and dominance, lead to the utter destruction of the Western Xia, and ultimately his own downfall? It's a question that has puzzled historians and experts alike. Today, we'll try to solve it. Let's dive in. The fall of Zhongdu in 1250 was a devastating blow to the Jin dynasty. But it did not mean their total defeat. The Jin emperor Xuanzong abandoned the northern capital and moved his court south to Kaifeng, desperately trying to reorganize his fractured empire. The Mongols had crushed Jin's authority over the northern plains, but they had not yet erased them from history. At this point, many expected Genghis Khan to complete his conquest of China. He had broken Jin's hold over its heartland, taken their greatest cities, and forced their emperor into retreat. Yet, instead of finishing them off, Genghis Khan's attention turned westward. The rising tensions with the Khwarezmian Empire, sparked by the infamous massacre of Mongol merchants in 1218, drew him away from China. With the Great Khan occupied, his trusted generals were left in charge of Mongol operations in China. Mughali, Genghis Khan's second-in-command, launched a devastating series of campaigns, burning cities, capturing strongholds, and ensuring that the Jin remained on the defensive. However, without the full might of Genghis Khan's forces, the Mongols could not deliver a final blow. The Jin continued to resist, retreating southward and even launching counterattacks. While the Mongols and Jin remained locked in a slow-burning war, another power in China, the Western Xia, was growing increasingly uneasy. The Xia had been subjugated by Genghis Khan in 1210, forced into vassalage, after a brutal campaign. Since then, they had lived under Mongol rule, supplying troops and resources for Mongol wars. But with Genghis Khan focused on the west, the Xia rulers saw an opportunity to regain their independence. By the early 1220s, the Mongols were demanding even more from their vassals. The Xia were ordered to provide additional troops, supplies and fortifications to support ongoing wars. At the same time, the Jin dynasty, long-standing rivals of the Xia, was showing signs of resilience. Some within the Xia court began to wonder, could they break free from Mongol control? The Western Xia had lived under Mongol domination since 1205, but they had never truly accepted their subjugation in 1210. The Xia rulers, descended from the Tangut people, had always been a proud and independent force in China. They had withstood centuries of pressure from the Song and Jin dynasties, carving out their own powerful kingdom in the harsh landscapes of the northwest. Their submission to the Mongols had been a reluctant one. When Genghis Khan first invaded the territory, the Xia had put up fierce resistance, but the Mongols, with their superior mobility and brutal siege tactics, had overrun them. In the end, the Xia emperor had surrendered, agreeing to become a Mongol vassal. However, Mongol vassalage came at a high cost. The Xia were forced to send troops to fight the Mongol wars, depleting their own military strength. Their economy was drained by constant tribute demands. Their people, once proud warriors, were now little more than expendable subordinates in Mongol conquest. As the Mongols waged war in Central Asia, the Xia found themselves in an increasingly difficult position. Their armies were stretched thin, their resources depleted, yet the Mongols kept demanding more. When Genghis Khan ordered the Xia to send additional troops for his western campaigns, the Xia rulers objected. They had already sacrificed too much. They stated that if Genghis Khan had too few troops to attack the Western Empire, then he had no claim to supreme power. In the following weeks, the citizens of Western Xia heard a statement against their Mongol oppressors. Some of them even attacked small Mongol garrisons or soldiers moving through town. Secret negotiations began. The Xia rulers reached out to the Jin, hoping to form an alliance. If they could coordinate their forces, they might be able to resist Mongol rule. It was a desperate gamble, but they believed it was their only chance. Genghis Khan was no stranger to rebellion. He had built his empire by crushing those who defied him, but the Western Xia revolt struck a nerve. These were people he had already conquered, and leaders who had sworn loyalty to him. Their defiance was not just a political challenge, it was a personal insult. Genghis Khan was still in Central Asia, mopping up the remnants of the Western Empire, when he heard that the Western Xia refused to send additional troops. He was over 60 years old, his body worn from years of war, yet his fury burned hotter than ever. He made a fateful decision. He would personally lead his armies back to China and destroy the Western Xia once and for all. His campaign would be one of annihilation, not conquest. There would be no peace offers, no negotiations. The Xia would pay for the betrayal with their very existence. The Mongols stormed into Xia territory in 1225, razing city after city. The Xia tried to resist, but they were no match for Mongol fury. Towns that surrendered were still massacred. The Mongols left nothing behind but ashes. This campaign was different from Genghis Khan's previous wars. In the Western Empire, he had destroyed cities but left land open for Mongol settlement. But here, against the Xia, he showed no mercy. This was not just about conquest, this was revenge. The consequences of the Western Xia revolt were nothing short of catastrophic. Genghis Khan did not merely punish the Xia for their betrayal, he sought to erase them from history itself. The Mongols had devastated cities before, but what they unleashed upon the Xia was total annihilation. As the Mongol army advanced, they adopted a strategy of complete destruction. Cities that resisted were burned to the ground. Those that surrendered were still massacred. Mongol forces systematically exterminated Xia military officers, nobles and government officials, ensuring that no future leader could ever restore the dynasty. Tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of civilians were slaughtered. The Mongols, known for their calculated use of terror, made an example out of the Xia, sending a clear message. Betrayal would not be tolerated. The capital, Zongjing, fell in 1227. The Xia emperor, desperate to save what remained of his people, surrendered. He was executed almost immediately. The royal family and high-ranking officials followed, put to death in brutal fashion. There was no negotiation, no mercy. Some sources even suggest that Genghis Khan ordered that the Xia ruler's entire bloodline be exterminated to prevent any future claim to power. The Mongols did not stop at political leaders. The entire cultural and historical legacy of the Xia was obliterated. Libraries, religious texts, and records were burned. Temples and palaces were demolished. The Tangut language, once widely spoken in Xia territory, vanished from recorded history within a few generations. Today, very little remains of Xia literature or their unique script. Few other Mongol campaigns reached this level of destruction. Even the Western Empire, which had provoked Genghis Khan's wrath, was not so thoroughly erased. Historians debate why the Mongols were so ruthless towards the Xia, but it is clear that their betrayal deeply offended Genghis Khan. Where other conquests had strategic purposes, the destruction of the Xia was an act of personal revenge. By the time the Mongols moved on, the Western Xia ceased to exist as a distinct civilization. Their people were absorbed into the Mongol Empire, scattered or simply exterminated. The land they once ruled became just another province of the Mongol domain. But even as the final Mongol troops tore to the remnants of the Xia, their great leader was fading. Even in victory, Genghis Khan's body had begun to fail him. The exact circumstances of his death remain one of history's greatest mysteries, but multiple sources agree that it happened sometime in August 1227, during the final stage of the Xia campaign. One widely accepted theory is that he fell from his horse and suffered fatal injuries. Given his age, he was in his mid-60s, and the constant strain of warfare, it is entirely plausible that such a fall could have led to his demise. Other accounts suggest that he was wounded in battle, possibly by a Xia soldier. The Mongols themselves were silent on the exact cause, likely to preserve his image as an invincible conqueror. More dramatic versions of his death suggest foul play. A famous legend claims that a captured Xia princess, taken into his harem, sought revenge for her people by assassinating him, either by stabbing him in his sleep or poisoning him. While this is likely myth, it reflects the deep resentment the Xia had towards their conqueror. Regardless of the cause, Genghis Khan knew his time was short. Before his death, he gave final orders to ensure that his vengeance against the Xia was complete. His generals carried him out with brutal efficiency, wiping the dynasty from the map. His passing was kept a secret at first, to prevent instability within the army. Only when the Mongols had secured total victory did they announce the Great Khan's death. His death marked the end of an era, but not the end of his empire. His sons and generals carried on his conquests, expanding the Mongol domain even further. However, his absence left a void that would never truly be filled. Without his singular leadership, the empire would one day fracture. For all his ambition and all his conquests, Genghis Khan could not escape the fate that awaits all men. His empire endured, but the seeds of its eventual division were already sown. His relentless drive had built the largest contiguous land empire in world history, but it had also led him to his final battle, in the dying lands of the Xia. Genghis Khan spent his life forging an empire unlike any the world had seen before, carving his legacy into history with blood and fire. But in the end, it was his own relentless ambition, his insatiable hunger for conquest, that led him to his downfall. He had crushed empires, rewritten borders, and bent entire civilizations to his will. Yet, he refused to step back, to rule from a battlefield rather than from the throne. At 65 years old, the Great Khan still commanded his armies in the field. Whether it was a battle wound, a riding accident, or the toll of years of war, something finally caught up with him during the Western Xia campaign. He had pushed his body and his empire to their limits, and in doing so, sealed his fate. His vision had outgrown even himself. He would not live to see the Mongol Empire reach its peak, nor witness the full consequences of the world he had reshaped. In 1229, a grand Kurutai elected his third son, Ugadai Khan, as his successor. Under Ugadai's rule, the Mongols expanded deeper into China, crushed the remnants of the Western Empire, and set their sights on Russia, Europe, and Persia. The empire Genghis Khan forged would endure for decades, but like all great powers, it would not last forever. Because no empire, that no matter how vast, is immune to time and change. Even the most powerful rulers eventually vanish, leaving behind mysteries and legends. Genghis Khan's tomb remains undiscovered to this day, his burial site hidden to prevent desecration. But he is not the only figure in history whose treasures have seemingly disappeared. Centuries later, at the end of World War II, an entire train loaded with stolen Nazi gold supposedly vanished without a trace. Rumors still persist of a hidden treasure buried beneath the mountains of Poland. But is the Nazi gold train a real artifact of history or just another legend? We will find it out in the next episode. Until then, I'm the Chronicler, reminding you to like, subscribe, and remember, history is written in mystery.